Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid, and these are the issues that we'll be discussing during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the latest situation as far as Sri Lanka is concerned. There have been huge protests by the students. Thousands of students have not only mobbed the Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa's home on Sunday and have demanded his resignation, but also are demanding the measures from the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Now, not only that, we all know that Sri Lanka has defaulted as far as its foreign transactions are concerned, and talks are on with the IMF as to how Sri Lanka will move forward as far as its economy is concerned. There have been months of lengthy blackouts, there has been a shortage of medicine, there has been a lot of other issues concerning economy, and Sri Lanka is going through its worst economic crisis since it became independent in 1948. This is going to be our first segment. Our second story of the day, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Indian propaganda over Kartarpur corridor, just one of the parts that we'll be discussing. Now, Pakistan has rejected this propaganda. The Indian side was saying that the Kartarpur corridor was being used for business meetings and others, and that has been categorically rejected by Pakistan's Foreign Office. Also, there has been an apparent visit by Narendra Modi to Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. At the same time, there has been a public notice that has been taken out by the Indian side as to those who wish to come study in Pakistan as students, those Indian students who want to come to study in Pakistan. So a lot of issues concerning India, a lot of issues concerning India and its further, of course, negative imaging of Pakistan is concerned, and that is going to be our second story of the day. Then we'll be talking about the French elections. We all knew that after the first round there was a lot of apprehension as to whether Marine Le Pen was going to win this time, and it happens a lot of times in France that the first round of presidential elections is won by the far right, and in the second round everybody just wakes up and then votes, and this time also the same happened. And now Emmanuel Macron has garnered enough votes to become the president of France for another period of 5 years. And then we'll be talking about a sanitary worker in grade 2 who has passed an online competitive examination which was conducted by Nadra, and now he has become an assistant director. Now, a wonderful and positive story to show anyone who wants to pursue something and who has a passion to do something with his life, that where there is a will, there is always a way. Let's come with our first segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns Sri Lanka and, of course, the economic crisis that has embroiled the country, the worst ever economic crisis since its independence in 1948. Protests, blackouts, lack of medicine, lack of paper, and whatnot. More in the following report.
Sri Lanka is suffering its most painful economic downturn since independence, with months of lengthy blackouts and acute shortages of food, fuel and other essentials. The crisis has sparked countrywide protests, with thousands of students demonstrators mobbed Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa's home over the island nation's worsening economic crisis. For more than 2 weeks, thousands of protesters have been camped daily outside the seafront office of President Rajapaksa, demanding for him and his brother to step down. Nationwide demonstrations have seen crowds attempt to storm the homes and offices of government figures. Police have kept up a curfew in central Sri Lanka a day after the killing of an anti-government demonstrator triggered international condemnation. At least 29 people, including 11 policemen, were wounded in the first fatal clash since anti-government protests broke out this month. The government promised investigations into allegations that police used excessive force to disperse people protesting across the island. Sri Lanka's economic meltdown came after the coronavirus pandemic torpedoed vital revenue from tourism and remittances, and the government has announced a default in huge foreign debt. International Monetary Fund has assured to help Sri Lanka with an amount of $300 million to $600 million to purchase medicines and essentials.
Amir Zafar Durrani, President Reenergia, joins us online. Thank you very much, Amir Sahab, to have joined us. When you look at the situation in which Sri Lanka is currently embroiled in, do you think that this was something that was anticipated, or do you feel this came out of the blue? All right. We would like to hear as to what Mr. Amir Zafar Durrani, President Reenergia, has to say. Yes, I
Khalid,
can
can
hear
you
you
hear me
now.
now?
I can hear you now. Could you kindly rephrase your question? I was asking as to what happened in Sri Lanka. Was it anticipated? Was it something that the people were seeing happening or about to happen?
Yeah, okay. So, sometimes, we live in the, as they say, Web 3.0. We live in an age of information, and we live in an age where I think news travels faster than the speed of sound. So, but nevertheless, it seems that news from Sri Lanka did not travel to us since April of 2020. My simple answer to your question is we really were not in touch with what was happening in Sri Lanka, and that's why we did not see the writing on the wall. And partly so did not the Sri Lankan politically, because of the simple fact that there is an incestuous ruling class on the top. But just to sort of illustrate what I said, the Fitch downgrade of Sri Lanka started in April 2020, where its credit rating went from B to B minus, and the Sri Lankan central bank responded with a counter argument and a unilateral rejection of these downgrades, right? So, in other words, they basically started becoming this phenomena of being like an ostrich with their head stuck in the sand. You go down to, so let's say, November, you see again the fiscal budget with the government of Sri Lanka. The discussions were very overtly optimistic. So, in other words, the Sri Lankan government was lying to itself to appease its political masters. And then obviously this goes on, but I think that I will not bore you with all the detail, but the simple answer is that the writing has been on the wall for a while.
All right, but the pandemic has also been a trigger factor as far as further exacerbating the current economic crisis is concerned. You talked about the rulers. What about the Rajapaksas? Do you feel that they are going to relent their throne or their positions in view of all the protests that have been going on and the current situation that the country is present in?
Well, I mean, the answer is it doesn't appear so. I mean, I have very good friends in Sri Lanka. Some of them are part of my ex alma mater, the World Bank, who are now based back in Colombo and in various parts of Sri Lanka. I think the part of it, number one, the answer is no. I don't see Sir Rajpaksa like any of these political parties that cling to thrones or they treat their civil servant duties as thrones. They are not going anywhere. You can see the fact that the Sri Lanka has brought on the army. There is a little bit of civil unrest, not a little bit, but a lot. But at the same time, there's another side to this coin, which I think is not making the news, and which I think people who live in Sri Lanka and are connected, and people like us who are connected with them may be able to explain better. And that side is that two feelings have kind of permeated to the top. And the first one is that really, what would one get from the Rajpaksas saying we are going? Who's going to take the reins? What difference is it going to make to the story of how Sri Lanka should get out of this mess? That's number one. So I don't think the question that whether they should go or not is valid for the Sri Lankans. What is valid for the Sri Lankans is that they are finding a lot of inward, I should not say, but let me say it, it's catharsis, right? So this opportunity, like any problematic situation, like any disaster, there is a huge opportunity and the Sri Lankan people are availing themselves of it. What is that? What I see is basically a lot of grassroots people, movements, sort of coming together and actually saying what really is wrong with us. Why haven't we really made this work? Questions that are being asked by Sri Lanka internally include the following. I'll just give you the top three. The first is, what happens living in a bad neighborhood? And obviously they are in a bad neighborhood because they've been abused by their larger neighbor, India, through the Naxalite movement and then the influence to the Tamil Tigers, etc. And the story is long. The second question that's being asked is Sri Lanka really was being played as a proxy fight ring, which means that there was a proxy war between India and China and other superpowers going on in this little pleasant island called Sri Lanka. And the third, which is that was the win over Tamil Tigers and the sort of uneasy peace that ensued after and the sudden euphoria of having suddenly become sort of an economic tiger. Was this really just a narrative, or was this real and deep rooted? So I think that, sorry, Khalid, that was a very long answer to
No,
your
no, but it was
question.
very interesting to know, to understand the whole background of this economic crisis that we see in Sri Lanka. And of course, another thing that you've also opened our eyes to is that this was something that was happening since 2020, but it was just that countries like ours did not understand what Sri Lanka was going through. Now that Sri Lanka has also defaulted on its external payments, do you feel IMF is the right anchor?
Well, I mean, if not IMF, then what? I mean, let me ask you that. It goes to, because if it's not the IMF, it forces Sri Lanka to go back into the arms of one or the other who have been using their country as a proxy fight ring, right? So my simple answer to that is, I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, the way the world is kind of structured economically from a global, both a security and a monetary system, I think the fund is their only recourse. I mean, let's go back to Indonesia in the 2008 crisis, no, sorry, in the 1999 2000 crisis, the East Asia monetary crisis, $8 billion directly fed into Sri Lanka, sorry, into Indonesia. So the thing is that really right now the appetite for the kind of rescue that Sri Lanka needs is only there in the fund. Now the question is, how do you actually use this kind of battle that the fund's going to point at you in terms of, and really, okay, let me just break this down into two parts. The first thing is, this is right about where the similarity between Pakistan and Sri Lanka kind of falls apart. Because if we were to take Sri Lanka's top three, let's say, foreign exchange earners, I mean, so it's tourism, it's exposure and remittances, right? So essentially, in the case of Pakistan, it's remittances, exports, and then the foreign funding that we get from the market. In the case of Sri Lanka, the latter, what I just described, is much, much smaller. So Sri Lanka, actually, if you correlate April 2020, that is really kind of when the pandemic had reared its head and had made itself a reality all over the world. Now, tourism really matters to Sri Lanka. It matters to Sri Lanka so much that even if you go back to the times of the internal sort of terrorists, the presence of the Tamil Tigers, the daily explosions, even in 1998 in Colombo, tourists were still coming and going, and Sri Lanka tried its best to put on a phase of normalcy to make sure that one of its largest forex earners stays online. Now, given that where they are now and the default is about to come, if they were not to go to the fund, what else can they do? Because where will they pick up paper from? Now, given that they have given large swaths of their port, Hambantota to be exact, to China, I mean, they can always go back to China. But, this has already been proven that the crisis in Sri Lanka, especially the forex crisis and the currency crisis, has got very little to do with what China was doing there. And I think this is something which is kind of a misinformation. So if China didn't have much to do with this crisis, then why should China come to its rescue? So let's see how this plays out. But the short answer is the fund is probably the only choice Sri Lanka has right now.
All right. All right, Amir Saab, also we know that the IMF is giving 300 to 600 million US dollars to Sri Lanka, but only to fund purchase medicine or essentials. At the same time, we all know that medicine and essentials are not the only things that Sri Lanka is in crisis of or in dire need of. There is flour, there is wheat, there is sugar, there's milk powder, there's rice as well. Do you feel that countries like India and China will pitch in, or maybe other countries will come in to help Sri Lanka with the other commodities?
Okay, so the answer would be much simpler had Ukraine not happened. So with Ukraine happening, let's just talk of food, right? So basically, in food items, let's talk of grain, and within grain, let's talk of wheat. So if we talk of wheat, we basically look around and see who could provide wheat. So it's Kazakhstan, Pakistan, Ukraine, Russia, we're looking at countries who technically are nearest and could be the best bet of providing some kind of assistance. But looking inside Pakistan, I think and I will surprise you, maybe I won't surprise you, but if you realistically look at it, we've had a bumper wheat crop. Now, if we were to play it right, we should not be requiring to import wheat, despite what all economists are telling us in Pakistan. So, does that mean Pakistan could actually leverage some of this? Because you have to understand that we have a very special relationship with Sri Lanka, as you know.
Of course.
So,
We've had them
you know,
overcome the Tamil Tigers in the past as well. So, of course, they
absolutely.
value
So I
that
think that
relationship a lot.
this is important for us. That you know, it's incumbent on us. Let's put this as human beings living in this human sort of community, and especially being in South Asia together, that we play our part in helping. But I have a feeling China will step in. I have a feeling that India will try to step in, and may not be, that will create a political furor. So will China. It's just that, you know, just like Pakistan, for different reasons, however, in the case of Sri Lanka, the community is polarized, but it's polarized for the better. And I per se have a positive feel that Sri Lanka will come out of this a stronger Sri Lanka than it was before this.
All right, Amir sir, we talk of Sri Lanka coming out of this economic crisis that, of course, is the worst since 1948, since it got independent, as a stronger nation. Do you feel, as you said, that it needs to look inwards, and it will look inwards? Do you feel it needs to look at other avenues to boost its economy in the coming years? And are there other avenues that you feel, because you know Sri Lanka better than a lot of us do, that it could lean upon in order to further strengthen its economic position in the years to come?
Yeah, I mean, okay. There are, again, sorry, I mean, I always think there's a yes and a no in your answer. So the answer is yes. I think that Sri Lanka will look inward, like every country has to look inward. Sri Lanka will have to look at its economy structurally. Now, remember that one of the things I did not mention is the earnings, forex earnings that Sri Lanka has by being a massive port of call. It lies on one of the world's most frequented seaways, right? So as the post-pandemic economy picks up, Sri Lanka's port calls will improve. Sri Lanka, you know, because this I forgot to mention, is also a great source of revenue, because all ships calling, whether they bring goods into Sri Lanka or are just transshipping them or are transiting through or dropping a few containers from other motherships to pick up, Sri Lanka is at that hub of the world marine connected highway. So Sri Lanka is part of that. And that's why you find Hambantota, that's why you find Colombo there, that's why you find Jaffna, the port above Jaffna. So, I mean, I think that when we talk about this, yes, they will look inward. They will start thinking about, you know, could they have more reliance? Now, energy is a big ticket item. They will rethink the whole story. Unfortunately, I visited Sri Lanka last in 2019, where I actually worked with the Ministry of Energy on you know, what should they be doing in terms of their future sustainable energy future. So I think Sri Lanka will have to do a big rethink around energy. I think the other rethink Sri Lanka is going to have to do is around food. And within food, around grain, rice, all these commodities, as to, you know, how much
it can locally produce instead of importing.
Either instead of importing or having reliable sources, right? So in other words, they may actually have to form a sub-SAARC reunion, you know, as to how to source these commodities. Because currently, if you pick up the UN Comtrade data on where they import most of these things from, it's really quite a wide basket. The last thing, actually, in addition to that inward looking, is also improving their complexity of their exports, which is, by the way, the same thing Pakistan has to look into. And within that, looking at how, you know, they try to integrate into the global value chains, but at the same time, this integration has not helped them, because they are, you know, in many ways a distant island. So they need to start looking at how the intermediary industry of what they export needs to be reshored into Sri Lanka. So I think that's also a big challenge for them. And sorry, last thing, and this is most important, is availability of credit locally. So there has been and I don't know if you know this, but basically there is a trust network that this very famous Sri Lankan economist, Jayamin Pelpola. I mean, if I pronounce it, I mean, he writes very well. And one of the things that I was looking at, he said that the bigger thing that Sri Lanka is going to start looking at is that how Sri Lanka is just driven by rating agencies. It's a bit like Pakistan, right? We hear that, we fell by 3 numbers on the corruption index. We raised ourselves on 5 numbers on the business enabling environment index. So the fact is that Sri Lanka has so far so much believed in these indices that they have not really understood the real signals of their internal markets. So the trust between the citizens, the local banks, the exporters, remitters, and the rating agencies needs to be coming back online. In other words, Sri Lanka has also to start looking inward at to what the real rating about transparency, about business environment in Sri Lanka really is, rather than relying on international ratings on this, which is, I
Amir
think,
Saab,
kind of
the way
rational.
back for Sri Lanka, you were talking of the different avenues as well, and it's very interesting to understand that from your perspective, because a lot of things that we do not know about Sri Lanka as far as its economy is concerned and how it needs to move forward. But do you feel the road back, or to the road, I mean, climbing the stairs back to an economic stability for Sri Lanka, will it be a long road, will it be a tough road, or will it happen smoothly?
It's a tough road. It's not a long road. That's my feeling. It will happen pretty rapidly. And one of the reasons it will happen pretty rapidly is because we're already looking for the FY23, which starts in another 2 months, the fiscal year 23. The massive boom or the re-emergence of tourism, which is now foreseen despite the small pockets of the pandemic rearing ahead, for example, like in China. So I think that they will have that sort of support. And people like this island. One thing I forget to tell you that 97 or whatever. I mean, the average between male, female, 97% literate people. It is really, I call it the Italy of South Asia. Very nice, welcoming people. So I think their genuineness of the Sri Lankan nation will bring tourism back. So it's going to be a tough road, but a short road. I think the declaration of bankruptcy was writing on the wall. It's almost like, it's ego of a certain group of politicians that led Sri Lanka to delay this. It should have been done 2 months back. And I think that if they are able to get rid of, or at least their politicians are able to step back in favor of more like a Bangladesh technocratic setup for a while, I think that will also do them well.
All right. And Amir Saab, do you feel that what has happened in Sri Lanka should serve or could serve as an example for other countries in the region, so as not to follow suit or to be aware when certain red flags are raised?
Yeah, I think that, my friend, and I have to mention him because I had a chat with him before the show, Dr. Akhtas Afzal in Habib University. So Akhtas has written a very nice article on, how this paves a way for Pakistan to learn. I agree and disagree on some of the positives, but I think the answer to your question is yes. I mean, the first thing we need to learn from this is that instead of hiding problems, let's just bring them out and call a spade a spade. And if it means defaulting on certain parts of what we have to default, let's do it now. And I'm not talking of global defaults, but there are many defaults that Pakistan can pull. And I would like you to consider that, just like in Sri Lanka, it's high time that we defaulted on some of our within Pakistan debt to the utility companies. I think we must do that to salvage that. I mean, it's not going to cause us IMF to default. It's not the same as defaulting globally, on our sovereign debt. But I think we should try and do some of that. So yes, there are lots of lessons we can learn from there. But let me tell you, the positive thing is Pakistan is structurally a very different country economically, just by the sheer size of the market that we command. I think we have different problems in Sri Lanka. But yes, there is a lesson to be learned.
All right. Thank you very much, Amir Zafar Durrani Saab, President Reenergia, to have joined us, and you have given us such ample amount of time to talk in detail about Sri Lanka's economy, its crisis, how it went there, and how it's going to, inshallah, come out of it, and how other countries can also take that as an example to not follow. Let's come to our second segment, ladies and gentlemen. situation that concerns our not so friendly neighborhood, India, that has again pointed the fingers at Pakistan when it comes to the Kartarpur corridor, that it is being misused by Pakistan. Not the first time that India has said that, it said that in 2020 as well. That and so much more that is happening from the Indian side. Also, Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, where Narendra Modi paid a visit. Is it also a face saving in all the barbarities that are happening in the region? That and more we'll be discussing in detail, but after this short report.
The peace of South Asia has long been held hostage owing to Indian hegemonic designs which dangerously imperiled regional peace. Pakistan, as torchbearer of peace, has spearheaded myriad endeavours to usher sustainable peace, and Pakistan's historic initiative of opening the Kartarpur Sahib corridor for Sikh pilgrims from India and around the world depicts its sincere efforts. Exhibiting its callous disregard for regional peace and stability, India is peddling deliberate smear campaign to tarnish reputation of corridor of peace. In response to its blatant lies whereby Indian propaganda machinery alleged that Pakistan had been misusing the Kartarpur corridor by using the corridor to conduct business meetings, Pakistan denounced Indian rhetoric. Foreign Office spokesperson Asim Iftikhar Ahmed noted that there is nothing new about India's desperate bid to malign the corridor of peace and divert the world's attention away from the grave injustices being done to its own minorities, especially Muslims. Granting highest primacy to rights of minorities while ensuring sanctity of religious places, Pakistan hosted over 2,000 Sikh pilgrims from India alone who were here to participate in the annual Baisakhi festival held from 12th to 21st of this month. Kartarpur corridor materialized owing to efforts of the Pakistani government, and the Modi government opened the corridor due to the pressure from Sikhs all over the world who generously appreciate Pakistan's commitment to diversity, inclusivity and religious harmony.
Lieutenant General retired Raza Muhammad Khan Saab, defense analyst, joins us online. Sir, thank you very much to have joined us. Sir, India does everything and anything that is usually and always based on malicious campaigns and falsehoods to malign Pakistan one way or the other. And this, what is happening as far as Kartarpur corridor is concerned, is just another in this spate of measures that are being taken, illegal, false measures that are being taken by India. What is India wanting to achieve? Everybody knows what India is doing is not right, is false, is malicious. Then why continue with it?
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So I think whatever India has said, that is actually an insult to all the 20 million Sikhs who live in India. It is also an insult to the entire Sikh community living all over the world that comprises about 35 million people in all. And Sikhism, as you are aware, is now the world's fifth largest religion. And I think such kind of expressions are an insult, to the entire Sikh religion, and to blame, let's say, pilgrims for treason. I think it is highly unbecoming of the Indian government. And let me also tell you that they have been blaming these pilgrims, whether from India or those who come from outside. They have been blaming them for treason against India, and they have been grouping them with the Khalistan movement. It is, of course, very unfortunate. And instead of being thankful and grateful to Pakistan for providing this gift to the people of India and particularly the Sikhs, where Pakistan's monthly expenditure is more than 5 to 6 crore rupees, despite the not so good state of its economy. So I think such kinds of conspiracies need to be stopped. And also, let me tell you that the Gurdwara Kartarpur Sahib is actually meant for 5,000 pilgrims a day. But after the corona, the Indian governments has been deliberately and willfully, I think, retarding the number of people or the movement for pilgrimage. And lately, I think there haven't been more than 200 people coming in for this pilgrimage. So I think it is the Sikhs of India and the world over who need to prevail upon the Indian government to stop them from this fear campaign against Pakistan.
When you talk of the Kartarpur corridor, you know, this is indeed a gift that Pakistan has given to the Sikh community, not only of Pakistan, of India, but the Sikh community across the world. When on the one hand, India does not reciprocate this gesture from Pakistan, on the other hand, it has been maligning Pakistan one way or the other, and also the Sikh community. You all remember the farmers' protests that happened in India, in which the Sikhs that were participating in the farmers' protests were called everything and anything, all the names under the belt, from traitors to whatnot, to they should leave India, and more malicious campaigns and the pressure tactics that the Indian government used. I mean, what I fail to understand is that India, considering itself to be the world's largest so-called democracy and a country where so-called pluralism is really rampant, don't you feel this is a huge slap on their face as far as their claims of being a democratic nation or a pluralistic nation are concerned?
Absolutely. I think India is no more the world's biggest democracy. It is the world's biggest single party rule where you see a clear apartheid because of their caste system, and where you see a fascist regime who are punishing all their minorities, particularly the Muslim, the Sikhs, and the Christians and the Dalits. And unfortunately, the world is silent on whatever they are doing there. But coming back, to Kartarpur, let me add to this that I think it was on the demand of the Indian and other Sikhs that they wanted to come and visit this place in groups, what they call jathas, of about 500 people each. So I think that also willfully the Indian government did not allow them to come in groups. And the blame that they have, made known through their Godi media is that, some people from both sides belonging to the International Rotary Club, they met in the Gurdwara. Let me inform you that the Rotary Club is an international organization which is meant for humanitarian purposes, for community services, for promotion of peace and integration. In India alone, there are 3,000 such clubs with more than 150,000 members. In Pakistan, you have only 3 or 4 such clubs. So probably, I'm not aware that some such members from either side may have decided to meet either earlier during the Baisakhi or subsequently, for some kind of a get-together.
Of course.
Which they have now called, a conspiracy against India and a security risk for them. So I think what Pakistan needs to do is that, the over 4,000 Rotary clubs all over the world, they need to report it to them because all the Rotary clubs are being maligned by this statement. And, the Rotary International is also, it is a very respectable organization which is linked to, I think, at least 10 very big universities at the international standard. So, instead of rejecting their efforts of bringing peace and integration, they should not be maligned like that.
You spoke of universities, Raza Muhammad Khan Sahab. I'd like to refer to another incident that concerns India and Pakistan. There is a public notice that has been issued by the University Grants Commission of India and the All India Council for Technical Education that advises students not to seek higher education in Pakistan and warns them of being denied employment. Now, I again fail to understand is when Pakistan opens its arms to students from all the other countries, including India, to get higher studies. India is again misusing this gesture by Pakistan in its own interest. Uh, do you do you feel that the normal public or these youth that are being denied an opportunity to get their higher education from other countries understand what India is doing to them?
You see, India is in the habit of politicizing and weaponizing everything that they see they can do. In the past, they have been politicizing cricket, the game of cricket, or sports in general. And now they have politicized education. That is most unfortunate, I think, and the world needs to take notice of this. The Indian media itself, the Indian opposition needs to take notice of this. I am, not in the position to tell you how many Indian students at the moment are getting educated in Pakistan. But this gesture by India to deny them, job opportunities once they return to India without, giving any reason at all, does not speak well of the decision makers of India. And I think it should be very clear now to all the Indian partners and the Indian friends, particularly, the United States, Russia, and the European Union, who need to prevail upon India and to make it accountable, not to weaponize and not to politicize at least sports or education. They actually need to promote these two subjects as much as they can. I think this will be in accordance with the wishes of the people of both countries, in accordance with the wishes of the entire region for peace and prosperity, in accordance with the SARC mandate. But I think all this is being violated by India, and I think Pakistan needs to make all this known to all the regional countries and to the SARC members and everyone else who matters.
And all this attitude, Raza, that seeks of tyrannical authoritarianism, we also see that the Prime Minister of India goes and visits Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir to seemingly show an aura of normalcy when, in fact, the truth is far from that. Does the world realize it? Does India realize it?
Yeah. So, this is his first visit after August 2019, and I think even before that. And he has gone only to some place in Srinagar, where, the security forces can be seen everywhere. They're stopping everyone moving or stationary. They're checking everything. And this is actually really a charade. And you have seen that, all the Kashmiris across the political divide, they have boycotted, any kind of participation with this. And probably, this is an exercise in futility to tell the world and to tell its own population in India that things are hunky-dory in Kashmir, whereas that is not the case. Kashmir was much better what it was before August 2019. Look at the economic situation of the people there. I think most of their breadwinners, they are in jails, and they cannot make two ends meet. There is zero democracy there. Ostensibly, the Prime Minister had gone there, to give a boost to democracy, but there is an imposed governor there from Delhi on them, and one does not see, any signs of any kinds of democracy, whether at the local level or at the state level in Kashmir. So I think this is a total exercise. It's a wasteful effort, and I think the earlier the world, the people of India, the media learns about it, the better it would be. So I think At the
It's just
same time,
that, Raza
there is,
Saab, I think the world media knows, the Indian media knows, but the Indian media is being kept mum or being kept silent because of all the tyrannical measures that the Indian government is putting on them. And so, of course, the same voices are being muted. And internationally, of course, as we've already discussed in the past, geoeconomy kind of surpasses all the other malintentions that India is pursuing within its country and in the region as well, which brings me to another measure that India has taken, that is the violation of the Indus Water Treaty. Now, it is laid the foundation stones for the construction of the Ratal and the Kwar hydroelectric power projects on the Chenab River in the occupied valley, that is in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, which is again a violation of the Indus Water Treaty. Do you feel that it is going to back out at any time? Do you feel there's going to be some pressure by the authority that overlooks the Indus Water Treaty, or do you feel this is going to happen as it is happening?
I think the consortium of the Indus Water Treaty, the World Bank and others, they need to, note this violation. The government of Pakistan, I think, would do everything possible to make sure that this does not happen, because it does not augur well for the confidence building measures between the two countries. And the Indus Water Treaty was one of them. They cannot deny, water to Pakistan, because if they do that, then obviously Pakistan will reserve the right to take retaliatory measures, as it deems appropriate. But I think, as you referred to why India is doing that, why is it, doing all that they are doing with impunity? And it is very clear that the big powers have shut their eyes to whatever, wrongs they are committing, not against Pakistan alone, but against most of their neighbors. And I think the United States even included a passage on Pakistan very recently in the 2+2 meeting there in Washington, D.C., where the U.S. Secretary of State made a mention of doing more on counterterrorism. And then the Foreign Office had to immediately intervene and to say that the United States or India had no right, to make a mention of what Pakistan
I
can do
totally agree with
or
you
is
on that.
not
In
doing.
fact, the United States should pressurize India to do more, or put sanctions on it, like put it on the FATF blacklist, in fact, because this is what India deserves, to be on the FATF blacklist, whereas it is on the white list. On the other hand, also put pressure so as to stop its malicious campaigns, the barbarism that it is continuing within India on the minorities and in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. I really hope, General Saab, that we see that day when that pressure will actually be exerted on India so that it changes its policies, and we will heave a sigh of relief whenever that happens. Thank you so very much, Lieutenant General Raza Muhammad Khan Saab, Defence Analyst, to have joined us and to have talked to us about this very important issue, and of course that is the malicious Indian propaganda. And this time it was on the Kartarpur corridor, but this malicious campaign has been going on everything and anything that concerns Pakistan, just to put it in a bad light. Let's come to our last two stories very quickly. The first concerns France, in which the presidential elections have taken place. The second round, in fact, in the presidential election in France, there are two rounds. The first round, there's a certain percentage, we see the percentage, and then there's a second round, and then it is counted as to who got the majority of votes. Whatever happens in France is that in the first round there's always the far right that gains popularity or more votes, and then the rest of the France that is neutral or leftist wakes up to it and then goes and votes for the second round. This is exactly what happened this time as well. Marine Le Pen, who belongs to a far right group, and like her father, was in the running to become president of France. So was Emmanuel Macron. And when they saw that after the first round she was gaining an edge over Macron, everybody went who hadn't voted for the first tour to go and vote for the second round. And so Emmanuel Macron became the new head of France for a period of 5 more years. There was a lot of joy, a lot of happiness within France as to the removal of the extremist or the far-right elements in France this time as well. He secured around 57 to 58% of the vote. So of course, let's hope and let's wish that Mr. Macron does well for himself, for his country, for the European Union, and for his relationship with other countries, including Pakistan, in these 5 years. And finally, we'll end on a very good, heartwarming note about a sanitary worker who passed an examination, a competitive examination, to become Assistant Director Nadra. He was in grade 2, of course, and there was an online competitive examination to become the Assistant Director of Nadra. He sat in it and he passed it, and he has now become an Assistant Director. Day of jubilation for all of those who want to achieve something but feel that do not have the resources or maybe cannot achieve it because of one reason or the other. This sanitary worker has just proven that wherever there is a will, there is a way. Taj Muhammad, we salute you, and we hope that many others like you will look up to you and will try to become and make something of their lives wherever and whatever comes their way, because you need to be optimistic, you need to have that zeal, you need to have that passion to do and to achieve whatever you want to achieve. With that, we come to an end of today's Newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new segments and stories that pertain to you, us and Pakistan. Stay safe and have a blessed fast. Allah Hafiz.